This video will show you how to replace the alternator on a Ford Edge with a 3.5-liter engine. This will be located along the front passenger side of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Let's make our way all the way along the driver's side of the engine compartment. Deep in this area, we can see where our master cylinder is. On the battery, we're looking for our negative battery terminal. That's the one all the way back here. We're using a 10mm to loosen the hardware just enough that we can remove the terminal end, and we'll set that aside. Just a quick inspection of that. We're going to set it aside. We do not want this making any contact while we continue on. Now we're going to have to drain our engine coolant. For that, we're under the hood. We can see where our coolant reservoir is. We'll carefully turn this counterclockwise to remove the cap. Once you have it dislodged, just a quick inspection will rest it on top. Now we're going to pause in the engine compartment. We're making our way under the driver's side of the engine compartment, all the way along the front where we have our subframe. If you were looking up inside this area, we can see our electronic cooling fan. We're looking just below the driver's side corner of that cooling fan. We have our coolant drain. Now, as far as this drain, you're going to be using a 19mm. You'll find that the fluid makes its way out through this lower circular port. We have our collection receptacle under here, of course. At this point, we can make sure that this is nice and snug. We'll clean any mess from under this corner of the radiator. Now, along the driver's side, we can see where our air filter housing is. We have this metal bracket. It's held in place with two 8mm headed bolts. Let's remove the pair in that bracket. Slide that off of there. Just remove that mounting hardware. We'll keep all this together. For now, we're just going to set it aside. Now that we have that out of the way, we're following the air filter housing towards our mass airflow sensor. You're going to find you have a small red locking tab. Go ahead and pry that out of place. I'm just using a small pocket screwdriver. You can use an angled pick if necessary. Once you have that pulled out and away, you should be able to hold on to the locking tab located in the same area. We're pressing that in. Now, once you have that dislodged, you should be able to grab onto the small locking tab directly in the center, squeeze that in, and pull it out of place. Let's start removing the upper housing from the air inlet tube leading towards the throttle body. We have an 8mm headed clamp. Just go ahead and turn that counterclockwise. Now that I have that loose enough, I'm going to continue on with my two locking tabs along the inboard side, and we can slide this out of place. For these locking tabs, just pry them out of place. We'll take hold of the air filter housing and the inlet tube. We're going to carefully separate the two. Now we're lifting this up and away. You're going to find along the driver's side of the upper housing, you have three locating tabs. On the lower housing, you have an area for those three to fit into. Let's remove our air filter from the area. We'll give it a quick inspection. Set that aside. Let's take hold of the lower housing and the inlet tube and carefully lift them up and out of position. Along the bottom, there should be some rubber mounting grommets. There we go. That's starting to come up. We can see two locating tabs, and if you were looking inside where the body of the vehicle is, we can see our two rubber grommets right down here. We're paying attention to our upper radiator hose. We need to disconnect the upper radiator hose from the radiator along the top passenger side of the radiator. You're going to find that there's a small squeezable clamp. I'm using some pliers to squeeze on the ears of the clamp. While doing that, we can wiggle the hose and slide it out of position. Keep in mind there could be coolant in this area. Now, once you've removed the hose, just give it a quick inspection. We want to make sure it's not torn, worn, or damaged. It's still soft and pliable. We're going to go ahead and take this hose and we're pulling it out and away. we'll just tuck this in behind this area. So there's an electrical wiring harness that goes all the way across the front of the engine compartment. We like to make sure we have plenty of slack from this, so I'm just using a small trim tool. You can use a flat blade screwdriver. We're essentially prying it out of place. As we make our way across, we're looking for any mounting points holding this in position. This one in the middle. As we come across, we've got one going into the fan shroud over here. There we go. As we make our way all the way over towards the driver's side, we can disconnect our electronic cooling fan. This has a locking tab. It's on the side closest to the fan. I'm pressing on it with my thumb, and I'm going to pull this out of place. Just a quick wiggle here. Slides right off of there. A quick inspection for corrosion. That looks good. Now to get a little bit more slack, we have one more mounting area right here. For this, you can either pry it out of place or you can make your way to the locking tab. As far as the locking tab, I'm using an angled pick. I'm coming down inside this area and I'm going to gently separate it. Continuing on with the fan removal, we're going to make our way along the top of each side of the fan. You're going to find that there's an 8mm headed mounting bolt. Go ahead and remove the bolt from each side of the fan assembly. As we move over towards the passenger side, this one's a little bit more difficult to gain access to. Let's take hold of the fan. We'll give it a wiggle. We're going to slide it out of place. Now that we have the fan out of the way, let's have a look down in this area. Now here's where we can see our alternator. We have our positive wire leading to it. Typically you're going to find a small rubber protective boot. Go ahead and take hold of that. We'll slide it out of place. Now as far as the wiring harness, we're using a 13mm to loosen the mounting nut. We'll remove the mounting nut and remove the wiring. That off of there. A quick inspection of the wire. We will be cleaning this prior to reinstallation, but for now, we'll just set it aside. Now let's move along to the rest of our wiring harnesses in this area. When you're looking at the upper wiring harness here, you're going to find that the electrical connector actually has a small locking tab tucked in behind our AC line. For this, you could try carefully reaching behind and squeezing, or you can use a small angled pick. I prefer an angled pick for this. I'm just going directly up against the locking tab, and I'm going to carefully pry up against my AC line, only enough pressure that I can pull this out of place. No corrosion there. For this, I'm going to use a small trim tool. We're going to pull this out of place as well, dislodging it from our alternator. Now, if this plastic tab does happen to break, you can replace it using a small wire tie if necessary. Now we can follow the wiring harness down. We have the electrical connector that leads to our AC compressor. It has a small locking tab right where my thumb is. I'm going to squeeze this in and pull that out of place. Let's set that wiring aside. Now as we make our way down along the passenger side of the engine, we're going to start removing the serpentine belt from our alternator pulley. To remove that, we're making our way towards our tensioner. In this area, we're going to have to use a 3/8 drive. We're going to turn this clockwise, releasing tension from our belt, and we'll slide the belt off of the alternator. You're going to have a thin tool here. Now, while pivoting that, I'm just going to remove my belt. You may find it easiest if you use an angled pick. We'll just make our way under that belt, and we're going to carefully slide it out of place. Obviously, if you intend on reusing the belt, you do not want to cause any damage. Let's go ahead and release tension from that tensioner there. Now along the passenger side of the engine, we're going to be using a 15mm for both pieces of hardware. Up along the top, you're going to find that there's a mounting stud with a 15mm nut. Down along the bottom, it's a little harder to see, but in that area, you're going to have a 15mm headed mounting bolt. For the lower bolt, you're going to have to pivot the tensioner out of the way. There's our lower mounting bolt. Set it aside. Now as we move up to the upper hardware, I'm using a 15mm ratcheting wrench. We can get directly onto this 15mm mounting nut and start removing it. Now we should be able to reach down, take hold of the alternator. We're going to give it a wiggle. Down along the bottoms where I'm reaching down towards, we need to attempt to move this around and break it free. Now that I have it broken free from down along the bottom mounting area, I'm going to carefully slide the entire thing towards the passenger side off of the mounting stud, and we should be able to remove it up from the top. As we start bringing this up, we want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to our radiator cooling fins. There it is, friend. I'm starting all the way down at the bottom. For this, I'm using a wire brush. The main areas to focus would be along each side where the alternator sits against. I'm attempting to remove as much debris from this area as possible. Of course, there is a port that goes straight through this. We want to make sure we inspect that as well, confirming there's no miscellaneous debris that might restrict that bolt. This looks good, so let's continue on up at the upper hardware next. That looks like it's in good usable order as well. Now we're moving along to our electrical wiring harness. Now, of course, we did have two plastic connectors. The smaller one leads down to the AC compressor. We've already looked for corrosion. We have the larger connector. This one goes to the alternator. Once again, no corrosion. Lastly, we have the large power wire. I had mentioned that we want to make sure we clean it. For this, I'm just using some fine sandpaper. I'm going to give it a light scuffing on both sides. We need to make good contact. There's no rust, no corrosion. Let's go ahead and set this aside again, and we'll continue on with the installation of our alternator. Now it's time for installation of our alternator. As we bring this in position, we'll be aware of our radiator cooling fins. We need to align the lower area with the bracket on the engine. We'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation. Of course, the pulley will be facing towards the passenger side. It's easiest to have this in the proper position now, rather than trying to spin it when it's down in the lowered position. Before you get the alternator into the fully lowered position along the bottom, we need to make sure we have it over the stud along the top. Now let's install our lower mounting bolts. We're just going to start this in and we'll lightly snug it up. Once you have it bottomed out, torque it to 35 foot-pounds. Now it's time for the upper hardware. We're starting on the 15mm mounting nut. We're going to bottom it out. The torque for this will be the same, 35 foot-pounds. 15mm mounting nut. Now at this point, we can reinstall our serpentine belt. It's going to be fairly difficult to see most of this. You do, of course, have the belt routing up on the screen here. We want to make sure we have it properly seated all the way around. As far as holding onto the belt, since it's so far down, I'm using a long angled pick. I'm holding onto the belt. Now I'm going to use the tensioner, release tension, so I can slide the belt over the alternator pulley. At this point, I'm slowly releasing pressure from the serpentine belt. Now, if you were to look very closely at the alternator pulley up here, I can see that my belt is not properly seated on the grooves of the alternator pulley. If I was to leave it like this, it's going to cause damage to the belt and potentially other damage as well. Now, with that said, I'm going to make an adjustment. We'll double check all of the pulleys before continuing on. There we go. Now that I have the belt on the alternator, I can tell that it's perfectly in place. Double check each and every one of the other pulleys, confirming that the grooves are properly seated. Now, after removing our tool from the tensioner, let's start with our electrical connectors. I'm all the way down at the bottom with the AC connector first. All right, I had that pressed together. Audible click. It's secure. Let's make sure that we reattach it up at the alternator as well. Now we're securing this to the alternator. My plastic clip did break, so I'm just using a wire tie as I mentioned. We want to make sure the wire is secure so it does not get damaged. Of course, we'll trim off any excess. On to the next electrical connector. This one's for the alternator. We have the locking tab. That's going to be facing towards the center of the engine compartment. Audible click from that. It's secure. We'll continue on with the positive wire next. As for this positive wire, we're going to make sure that we bring it down onto the mounting stud as far as possible. Continue on with your 13mm headed mounting nut, holding this in place. The torque for this will be 155 inch-pounds. Make sure you reinstall your protective cover. Slide that all the way on there. Double check to make sure it's completely covered all the way around. After double checking to make sure we're completely seated on each one of our hooked areas down below, we need to make sure that the top area is properly aligned for our mounting bolts. As far as those mounting bolts, go ahead and start them in. Once you have both of them started in and we're properly seated, you can tighten them up. Now I've got both started in. Let's make sure they're tight. Obviously, same thing for the other side. Let's secure the wiring harness next. All the way over towards the passenger side, we know that we have an area that it slides through the bracket. As we continue on up along the top of the fan, we'll make sure that we secure it all the way across, heading towards the driver's side. Line it up, press it in. Continuing on across. Line that up. Now there should be another tab that presses in right here. Ours is clearly broken. We'll continue on. Double check, make sure that's secured in place. Let's plug in that control module for the fan assembly. Now it's time for the upper coolant hose. We're making our way across the top of the fan assembly. You can see where the hose needs to slide in between this bracket area. Now, as we make our way over towards the passenger side, we need to align this with the radiator, but we need to squeeze our clamp, slide this in, make sure the clamp is in the proper position, and of course, make sure it's properly secure. I'm attempting to slide this off of the radiator. It does not move. Let's prepare to install our lower air filter housing. Before we bring it into position, pay attention along the lower bracket. We have two small rubber grommets. Apply some lubricant. After applying lubricant, if you are looking at the bottom of the lower air filter housing, we can see the two locating tabs that will slide into those rubber grommets. Let's line it up, press it straight down, make sure it's secured in place. I have it lined up, let's press it in. Just an audible click from that. Quick wiggle. Let's go ahead and secure this in place as well. This is just going to slide directly into this position here. Press it on. Now we have our small bracket. As far as the inboard side, closest to the housing, it's going to go under the rubber grommet. Once I have it in place, I'm going to continue on with my 2 mounting bolts. We want to make sure we start them both in before tightening either of them. Time for the air filter. Let's get this in place. Upper air filter housing. As for the outboard side, towards the driver's side, we have 3 locating tabs. The lower housing has 3 slots for these to line up with. Once you have it pressed in, we're going to swing this down, and then we have the air inlet tube that goes from the air filter housing towards our throttle body. Once you have it completely pressed into position, tighten your 8mm headed clamp. Make sure it's nice and tight. We'll make sure that we secure our upper housing to the lower housing. We have 2 locking tabs for this. Line them up, press them in, listen for a click. Now it's time for the mass airflow sensor electrical connector. As far as this connector, the locking tab will be along the bottom. Once you have it pressed in and you hear an audible click, lock it in with the secondary locking tab. That is secure, locked in, double checked. Let's secure the wiring harness next. This just goes into the corner of the air filter housing. You can use a wire tie if that happens to be broken. It's time to reconnect the negative battery terminal. Prior to doing that, I typically like to make sure I clean the battery post and of course the terminal ends. So I'm just going to use a battery brush for the battery post. That looks good. Let's bring the battery terminal end over to a position where we can gain access. We're cleaning along the center with our battery brush so we can make good contact with that battery post. After confirming it's not damaged or corroded, we can take that terminal end and we're sliding it onto the battery post as far as possible, and then you're tightening your 10mm mounting nut. Right there is bottomed out. Just take it a tiny bit further and double check to make sure that's properly secured in place. Now it's time to fill the cooling system. When we fill this, we're going to use the manufacturer specified coolant. You can also use universal. We're going to fill all the way up to the maximum line here. After that, we can start the vehicle. We'll let it run and get up to normal operating temperatures. Once you hear the cooling fans turn on, you're going to want to make sure that you top off that coolant once again. Typically, it will make its way down once the thermostat opens. I'm just going to use a funnel up along the top here. We'll run the vehicle without the coolant cap in position so we do not build up pressure. Now once you've run the vehicle, it's up to normal operating temperatures, the cooling fan's turned on, you want to make sure you turn it off. We're going back over to the coolant reservoir. Typically you're going to find when the cooling system's hot, the coolant level will be a little higher than what it would be when it's cold. Once you're sure that you're full, we'll continue on with our cap. Turn that all the way until it bottoms out. Make sure it's secured in place so you do not have a coolant leak. Now we finished the installation. The next thing that you want to do is take your vehicle for a road test. You want to listen for any odd noises and of course make sure you do not have a battery light on your dash. Aside from that, thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.